I just want to do another little plug. If anyone wants to donate any money to the Alameda Community Food Bank, that would be lovely. There are people who definitely have food shortage right now. So
we have a fundraiser on our Facebook page that you can go to do that. Or I'll post a link in here that you can just directly donate to them, either of those.
Right.
Awesome.
The next storyteller, as you probably may have guessed, is Dan Klein. Dan is my husband. And he and I co-created Storycraft at Stanford together. We taught it there for about 6 or 7 years. And he's still teaching improv at Stanford. So take it away, Dan.
Thank you. The greatest summer of my life was spent on a lake in the mountains telling stories to 3- and 4-year-olds. I was a camp counselor at my Alumni Association's family resort camp on Fallen Leaf Lake near Lake Tahoe. I loved it. I loved the kids. The 3- and 4-year-olds were amazing. Camp was what I would call a story-rich environment. I told stories with the kids. I made up stories with them. I told stories to them. I told stories about them to my fellow counselors. My favorite part about the summer, genuinely though, probably was my co-counselors, the rest of the staff. They were amazing. They were by far the funniest, hardest working, most supportive, intelligent, talented group of people I'd ever been around. I didn't actually realize how talented they were until the end of week 1. The way this family camp works is there's a 1-week schedule. Families come up and the whole family stays together, the parents and the kids. At the end of 1 week, they all leave and a new family comes in and we repeat the schedule with a new group of guests. On Friday night after dinner, I had nothing on my schedule. I just followed the entire crowd out of the dining hall down into the old lodge and watched the talent show. I had no idea how this had come together, but all of my co-counselors had amazing talents that I had no idea about. They were singers, they were dancers. One guy was a magician. I was blown away. My favorite act by far was Andrew. Andrew was a senior. He just graduated. He was an NC2A varsity athlete, tall guy, about 6'4". He'd walk out on stage. It was very low key, really quiet. He was the volleyball instructor. He'd walk out on stage with faded jeans, kind of bow-legged, white t-shirt. And he'd say, real quiet, he'd say, "You might get the urge to clap along, but don't." And then he'd start tapping his foot. And of course, there were a bunch of kids sitting in the front row, sitting on the floor right in front of the stage. They would all start clapping along. He would just look at them and shake them off. He'd say, and everyone would get quiet. He'd wait till the entire room was stone quiet. And then he would add slapping his hand on his thigh. Pretty soon, he'd start slapping other parts of his body. He'd be using both hands. The rhythm would get faster and faster. It would get more complicated, more intricate. The word syncopated pops into my mind, but I don't even know what that means. There was something going on with what he was doing, and it was getting faster and faster and faster. He would whip the crowd into a frenzy. At the end, he would throw his hands up in the air, and he would get a standing ovation every single week. It was awesome. I loved it. That year at school, I had started taking some theater classes. I'd been on stage a little bit, and I loved the idea of getting a reaction out of the audience. I was awed by Andrew because he didn't have lines, he didn't have props, he didn't have a costume. He just did this thing and made the audience go crazy. I told him, I said, "Andrew, that act is incredible. I wish I could do it." He said, "It's pretty easy. I'll show you how. It's called the Hambone. My dad taught me." I said, "I don't think I can do it. I don't really have very good rhythm, so I don't think I can do what you do." He said, No, you don't need rhythm. You just need to learn a few sounds. So one is when you slap your thigh this way, one is when you slap your chest, and then the other one is a backhand on your thighs. You just go boom, boom, boom. And I went, oh, yeah, I don't know. I can't do it. He said, no, you can. You're just choosing not to. That kind of stuck with me a little bit. The next summer, I came back to camp, trying to recreate this greatest summer of my life. After Friday night dinner on week 1, I discovered how the talent show was put together. It turns out it's not on anyone's schedule. As we were all filing into the old lodge, the host that year stopped me, said, oh, good, Dan, do you have an act that you can do for tonight's talent show? I said, no, I don't have anything, but I can't wait to see what everyone's gonna do. He said, you don't understand. I need you to go up there. We don't have any acts. I said, you don't understand. I don't have anything. There's nothing I can do up there. I started to get really nervous. The idea of getting up on stage terrified me without rehearsal, without practice. I had taken a class in improvisation. Lisa mentioned Patricia Ryan Madsen, amazing improv teacher. I took the beginning improv class. One thing I learned in that class was I was not going to go do a solo improv without planning anything in advance. No chance. Solo, no way. But another thing that I learned from Patricia, among all the other lessons about make your partner look good and say yes, one of the things she said was, whatever you're asked to do on stage, pretend you're an expert. In that moment, what I really wished was that I was an expert at doing the Hambone. I might have said something out loud because the host said, okay, great, you're gonna go first. I thought, what have I gotten myself into? I stood off stage, I waited while he welcomed everyone. Everyone got the whole crowd cheering. And then he said, first up is Dan. I walked out on stage thinking about this lesson, pretend you're an expert. I knew how to walk out on stage. So I walked as confidently as I could. I overdid it. I played this huge swagger. Got to the edge of the stage and I said, you might get the urge to clap along, but don't. I thought the audience would laugh. I thought they would get that I was just making a joke and they would go, oh, haha, how fun this will be. They didn't laugh. Instead, I could hear people in the audience say, oh, good, it's him. He's going to do it. They thought that I was Andrew. They forgot what Andrew looked like from the year before. I thought, uh-oh, all right, well, there's no getting out of it now. And it just starts with tapping your foot. Started to tap my foot. I thought, I can be an expert at doing this. Full commitment. And I added slapping my thigh. I thought, here it comes. There's no way out now. I just started slapping myself as hard as I could, as fast as I could. Full commitment, total disaster. But it worked in a way in that the audience laughed. They thought, they got it. They got my joke. They understood I couldn't do it, and they appreciated my commitment. And at the end, when I threw my hands up in the air, they gave me an ovation. It was not a standing ovation, but it was definitely an ovation. I was actually stunned that it worked as well as it did. And in fact, the host the next week told me I was going to do that act again. It became a regular act every week. The lesson, pretend you're an expert, is the only thing that could have given me the courage to step out on stage that summer. I ended up later that summer, one of the faculty guest speakers was Patricia Ryan Madsen. She gave a talk about improv to all the guests. I told my fellow counselors, that is my life goal, is to become the faculty guest speaker at this camp. When Patricia retired, I took over her job at teaching improv at Stanford. This summer, I was invited to be the faculty guest speaker. This summer, camp was canceled. because of the COVID-19. When I first heard it was canceled, of course I was sad. And then I was really sad to think about all the stories that were lost from such a story-rich environment. There's an interesting thing that happened to me that summer doing the Hambone. And I think it happened somewhere around week 8. I realized that my act was no longer me pretending to do the Hambone. Somewhere along the way, I learned how to actually do the Hambone. I would have told that story as the faculty guest speaker this summer. I've also realized, even though the opportunity, this story-rich environment has disappeared for this summer, one of the things I've learned from Michelle and Michelle is that every environment is a story-rich environment. So even though there are not going to be those camp stories this summer, it leaves open an infinite number of new stories that could possibly be told. And now, you might get the urge to clap along, but don't.
Woo!
Thank you, everybody.